Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to a new video. So a question that I get asked very often on all my videos is what gauges do I run on my Accessport? People just want to know what to monitor, what are good things to look for. So I want to go over the 6 different gauges that I keep on my Accessport and go into a little bit of detail as to why I monitor those 6 things. Now, just a little bit of an update on the truck. You guys saw at the beginning of the video, there was some snow. The day before yesterday was like 60 something degrees, beautiful out. I actually washed up the Telluride for the first time in a while. It was filthy, looks nice and clean and really nice. But what I did on the truck before it snowed was actually removed the chrome OEM side steps. I hated these things. They look terrible. Obviously, yes, they're very practical, but I just hated the look of them. Plus, as you guys know, I don't like any chrome on my cars, and I was in the process of removing all the chrome on my truck throughout pretty much all the videos that you guys have seen. And the side steps over there were one of the things that I wanted to kind of address. So I ended up just taking them off entirely. And for right now, I'm pretty happy with not running anything. I think it looks really clean. I'll throw a few pictures up for you guys so you can see. But a lot of people ask me if I'm looking into anything else, other options. And I am looking at the AMP Research running boards, which are the ones that are retractable. So when you open the door, they come down, and when you close it, they go up. It's a really clean look. They are pretty pricey though. They're, like $1,500. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to go down that route, but for right now, I'm okay with just running them without it. Again, I think it looks really clean and really nice. So I just wanted to update you guys on that. Also, I ended up purchasing some pretty pricey badges for the truck. The front grille and the rear tailgate, the Ford badges. I tried to do some decals, some vinyl overlays, but they didn't turn out the way that I wanted it. So I ended up just ponying up and spending a decent amount on some really nice matte black badges. So those are coming as well. I also got some really nice Eco Boost badges as well for the side door. I was going to remove those totally, but the truck is completely blacked out, and I thought adding some nice contrast down there would be cool. So it's a black badge entirely, and then the Eco Boost writing is in red. So nice little touch. I think it's going to add some nice contrast. So that should look pretty cool. But those are the updates for the truck. So now let's hop into the STI, show you my gauges, and go into detail as to what and why I monitor those 6 things. All right, so as you can see, these are the 6 gauges that I run. I'm gonna go over them quickly and then go into detail about each one so you get a better idea. So up here we got boost, intake temp, coolant temp, the dam, fine knock learn, as well as feedback knock. There is a crazy amount of things that you can actually monitor, but on this, you can only monitor 6 at a time. But if we go to the top and hit setup, you can actually configure the different gauge layout that you want to run. So if you go to the top here, gauge layout, you can run 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. I like 6 because I like to monitor as much as I possibly can. So in order to change up the gauge, all you got to do is go down and select the gauge that you want to change. So we're just going to go here just so you can see the list. But at the top, you can see change the monitor. So this is the list of different things that you can run through. It's insane. Let's just go to the top so you guys can see just how many different things you can monitor. Lots of different things you can monitor and change up and kind of configure your own little gauge setup. But for me, these 6 ones that I just went over are my favorite ones to kind of monitor and keep up at all times. Let me go back, select boost, and we can start talking about the gauges. So first and foremost up here, as I mentioned, boost. Of course, we all want to monitor boost. We don't want to over boost. We don't want to under boost. We want to make sure that we're kind of staying right where we need to be. And yes, you're probably wondering, why do I monitor the boost over here while there's a boost gauge over here in the MFD, the multifunctional display? This one's okay, but over here, I trust this one way more since this is connected directly to the OBD2 port. Both gauges seem to be, pretty spot on when I'm, driving the car, but I keep my eye on this one mainly because I don't run the boost gauge over here. I actually run this gauge, a little bit of information, tells me about my average miles per gallon and how many miles I have left until empty. Just some things that I like to monitor when I drive that are not related to the motor, just kind of my driving habits and everything like that. But obviously, as we all know, boost is a great thing to monitor. I think most people run that as well. So I like to keep that in the top left. Now, if we move over to the right here, intake temp. I really like to keep an eye on that, especially on hotter days. I really don't like to beat on the car if it's over 100 degrees. And the reason for that is because of heat soak. Obviously, putting more heat into the motor is not a good thing to do. So if I see anything over 100 degrees on a really hot day, I don't beat on the car, I just drive it normal. That's just what I do. If you want to beat on the car, if it's 110, 120, that's totally fine. But for me, I like to kind of monitor that as much as possible and make sure I'm under that 100-degree threshold if I ever really want to get on the car a little bit harder than normal. I also will note that the Redline carbon fiber intake dropped the IATs a solid 10 to 15 degrees over the Cobb SF intake. So if you're looking to lower your IATs, I would definitely recommend picking up the Redline carbon fiber intake. Coolant temp. Now, obviously, this is not something you really have to monitor at all times, but for me, I like to keep an eye on it. Usually, I stay around the 170 to 180 degree mark around there. It's obviously a nice thing to keep monitoring as well, especially on a hotter day. You know, it's even more so if you track the car, you want to make sure that you're not overheating, and that coolant temp range is kind of right where you want it to be. And especially after I installed the coil radiator, this dropped a solid 5 to 10 degrees. So I'm usually around 170, 174 degrees or so, when before it was around 180 to 185. Now over here, the dam. A lot of people are confused what this actually is, but I'm going to go into detail as to why it's important to monitor this. So what does DAM stand for? It stands for Dynamic Advanced Multiplier. Another name for it is also IAM, which stands for Ignition Advanced Multiplier. And what the DAM actually does is it actually monitors the fuel octane inconsistencies. So if this number drops, doesn't mean that your engine's going to blow up or it's anything seriously wrong. And if that does drop at any point, what it can actually tell you is there could be an issue with boost problems, you know, a boost leak or vacuum leak, fuel system problems, or improper mapping. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on. Now, if it drops it at any point, it doesn't mean, like I said, your engine's going to blow up or there's something definitely wrong. So you always want to make sure it stays at 1.0 at any point. If it drops, you know, I would definitely be a little bit concerned and look into it and try to source the issue. Obviously, there may be some other issues that pop up when that drops, so you may be able to tell right away that there is something wrong. But always, always, always make sure it stays at 1.0. Thankfully, it has never changed for me in my 5 years of ownership. It has stayed at 1.0000 at all times. So that is definitely something you want to keep up there. Now down here is find, knock, learn. So in the EJ motor, there's actually microphones, believe it or not. So when those microphones pick up certain frequencies, it says, hey, there could be possibly a knock in that RPM range when you're doing this and this gear at that RPM. So find, knock, learn is not as important as feedback knock. And the reason for that is because find knock is something that the car thinks it may be a knock event. So what this actually is telling you is saying, hey, there may have been a little bit of knock at this certain RPM, this, you know, whatever that is that you may be doing at wide open throttle in this gear, and it learns it. So it learns that knock and then it kind of memorizes it and goes away. So what I typically do if I ever see a number pop up on there, I kind of hold the accelerator or the gas pedal at that RPM range in that gear. Then you'll see the number stay there, kind of go down and then back to zero. So what that means, it learned that event and it won't happen again. Now, I wouldn't really sweat about that. I wouldn't worry about it too much, but it is something nice to monitor. And I think it is important to keep an eye on. Last but not least, feedback knock. I'm sure STI owners, WRX owners, everybody, we all know what feedback knock is. Basically, it's a knock event saying something is happening in the motor, that there possibly can be some knock going on. So right before I really get into it, I want to say if you see anything in the negative 1.4 to negative 2.8, that is 110% normal. Do not sweat, do not freak out, do not think your motor is going to blow up. That is 100% normal. If you ever put the Accessport on your car without loading a map on or anything, you'll actually be blown away at what this says on the stock map. It's pretty crazy, the numbers that it throws out. And even some couple other tunes that I've run in the past, it's pretty wild just to see. Now, one thing to note, obviously, if you're getting some feedback knock, even negative 1.4 to negative 2.8, when you're just driving around, don't worry about it. The one that you really should be concerned about is if you're wide open throttle and it starts throwing numbers here, that is the one that you should really pay attention to. Now again, negative 1.4 to negative 2.8 is 100% normal. Don't freak out. That is something that actually should be happening. And here's why. If you got a custom dyno tune and you're driving the car and everything, and this stays at 0 at all times, that's a problem. Now let me go into detail as to why. Like I said, the motor has knock sensors. It has little microphones inside the motor to pick up those knock events. So if it stays at 0 at all times, that most likely means that your tuner turned off your knock sensors, and that is a big no. If you ever get a custom tune, E-tune, Dynatune, whatever, and it always stays at 0, you may think the tune is amazing, but I promise you, most likely they turned off the knock sensors, and that is not a good thing. And the reason for that is because if there is actual knock events, you won't know, because that is turned off and that will stay at 0 at all times. So immediately, if you see 0 knock at all times, I would 100% recommend going with a new tuner and make sure they do not turn those off. Now I'm running a custom stage 3 dyno tune from RT Tuning, and I see negative 1.4 very rarely. I have seen negative 2.8 once in a while. It's very, very rare, but it's usually when I'm just kind of cruising around. So it's not at the wide open throttle like I mentioned. So it's not something that I'm concerned about at all whatsoever. If I ever saw numbers over the negative 2.8, especially when I'm wide open throttle and driving hard, then it is something to be concerned about. But like I said, negative 1.4 to negative 2.8, don't worry about it at all. Now, 2 other things that I monitor in my car, obviously it's not on the Accessport, but they're down in the VLS gauges here, is the wideband as well as the oil pressure. 2 very important things to monitor, especially if you're tuned and you're kind of running more power and more boost than stock. Wideband, that measures air-fuel ratio. You want to make sure you're not running too lean. Lean is bad, rich is okay. You'll be okay running rich. But if you go lean, that is not good. You're not running enough fuel, and the engine can actually starve of fuel, and you'll have some major problems. Obviously, oil pressure, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. You want to make sure you have oil pressure at all times, so that is something to monitor as well. Another thing that I wish you were able to monitor in the STI and the EJ motor was oil temperature. That is one thing that is not in the MFD up here. The WRX guys have that since they have a temperature sensor on the oil pan. You can't monitor on here. And the only way to monitor is to get an actual gauge and run it to the oil pan, which is something I might do in the future. But that is something to monitor as well. All right, guys, so there we go. Those are the 6 things that I monitor on my Accessport at all times. I'm always keeping an eye on them, making sure they're staying within the certain values that is okay. They're not, throwing some crazy numbers or anything. Another great thing about the Accessport is it's not just for people with a tuned STI or WRX. It's a great tool in general. And the reason for that is because you can read codes, you can clear codes. It's just a really, really nice tool. But one thing is a lot of people ask me is, do I need to run a tune to use the Accessport? And no, you can actually just plug it right into your OBD2 port and use it with the stock map. It'll still give you values. You can still monitor everything that you want to monitor, which is a really, really great thing. So it's a multifunctional display, multifunctional gauge that you can use on your stock map. You don't need to run a tune in order for it to work. But yeah, that's all I got for this one, guys. I got that question a lot, so I figured I'd make a dedicated video explaining all the gauges and all the things that I monitor as to why and exactly what they are, a little bit more detail. I figured it would be important and helpful for you guys so you can monitor the same things or kind of go off and do your own thing. But yeah, that's all I got for this one, guys. If you have any questions at all, be sure to ask them below. But in the meantime, keep it clean, keep it simple, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.